Welcome to Mean Age Daydream with me, Brian McWilliams, where we're going to be making some jokes, laughing out at broken world, but also laying out some philosophy for the future, how we can fix this mess we're in and have a great time doing it all with a Mean Age Daydream. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Mean Age Daydream. I'm, of course, Brian McWilliams, your beautiful, bountiful host. Been working on my pecs. Hopefully they look good. Hopefully I'm starting to be more busty because I hear, and we're going to talk about the fact that apparently, the bustier you are, the sexier you are, the more Joe Biden, or at least a Joe Biden conduit, might be interested in hiring you to push political propaganda on the masses. And as we know, as one of the most handsome libertarians I've got the tits to do it. So Joe, you get in touch with your old boy, Brian McWilliams, here at the Lions of Liberty Network. Guys, at the top of the show, I usually do this at the bottom. At the top of the show, if you wouldn't mind, go give us a like, give us a subscribe, go write a nice comment on your social medias. It really does make a difference. And of course, if you're watching this on Rumble or YouTube, hit the notify button. YouTube especially really screws us right in the ass with the algorithm there with the shadow banning. So make sure you hit that notify button. And as John Odermatt said, if you're trying to watch this on Facebook in a group, well, Mark Zuckerberg's decided, zuck you, no explanation given, just decides we're not allowed to use StreamYard to broadcast live, or I think anybody can broadcast live to Facebook in a group anymore. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe they want to make us pay for it. Maybe they're going to choose a paying tier to further screw people over. I don't understand it. I think this further is going to drive people away from using Facebook. I use it as solely a means to do this. So what point is there to me even going on it at all anymore? And by the way, for those of you in the Lions of Liberty Pride group on Facebook, we are, John and I, figuring out what we're going to do. I think that might be a signal channel, dedicated signal channel. Might be a pivot to something else. We're figuring that out. But don't worry. We'll make sure that we get you covered. In the meantime, screw Mark Zuckerberg, screw Facebook. And people screwing themselves. That's what Joe Biden's going after. I'm going to share with you a video because as you saw by the title of this episode, which I am proud of, Joe Biden's Onlyfans paid propaganda, that hoe over their army. I think it's something like that is what I named it. We're going to see that the tactics used by the political class, at least on Joe Biden's side, I haven't seen any specific ones for Trump yet, other than the chick who got famous yelling at an airplane that MF over there is not real. And then it was seen in a bikini for like that off beer brand that maybe the Daily Wire made. Does she count as a right-wing influencer? You tell me. You can tell me in the comments. But in the meantime, here is the video that has caused quite a stir. And this is a current OnlyFans model who I guess got her start on TikTok and was on, I think maybe it was with Colin Rugg. So here she is. Hold on, let me see. What's her name? 1 second. Let me go out of here. What is this chick's name? Well, anyway, let's just play the video and I'll figure that out in just a second.
I started TikTok like the spring semester of my senior year, and I was like, fuck, I finally have to start applying for law school. And then female privilege, life is so easy for a, woman. Obviously, I lucked out. I'm just kidding. I lucked out. And then, TikTok was basically full-time for me. I think I was taking ads by the time I graduated college from like the Biden administration and Planned Parenthood and like dating apps and stuff. So it was like fully financially, sustaining.
So you were getting, the Biden administration was buying ads from you?
Yeah, I was doing full-on political propaganda.
And they would really? With like what kind of like Biden created 10 million jobs this year?
Honestly. And the funny thing is they're like, do not disclose this is an ad because, they're like, technically it's not a product. So you don't have to disclose it's an ad.
Don't disclose this. Don't disclose your legs either, because that is going to make people tune out. Make sure the legs stay open. The propaganda stays flowing. If you're going to squirt, make sure to squirt political propaganda. Okay.
Because I think they just wanted like some edgy girl of color to just tell people, like when they nominated like Ketanji Brown Jackson, they're like, can you say like as a person of color, that you feel reflected? And it's like a white woman emailing this to me, and she's like giving me this script, and I'm like, no. And she's like, please. And I'm like, no, I'll like talk about the news of it, but I'm not gonna have a white person tell me to be like, this is how I feel as a person of color. Like, it's just so, I think that black-pilled me slightly on like, political propaganda
so
stuff.
The Biden administration sees, here's this young
Yeah, I mean, they use like a conduit. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not Biden, but it's
not
like
Biden.
it's like a third party. You know what I mean? It's like a media company that's doing it on his behalf. I'm not blaming him for this.
Yeah, and the message is like, because you're a dark-skinned woman, you will be inspired by Ketanji Brown Jackson, and all the kids should support her.
Yeah, they're like, basically as like another black person, just say that like you feel reflected by Ketanji. I'm like, no, I'll talk about like Ketanji's background and her accomplishments, but like I never, you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna say like the corny stuff, even if it was a brown person emailing it to me. I'm like, no, that's not like how I feel.
All right, so there you go. There's this this influencer. Let me stop so I can actually see her name. What is this gal's name here? It is let's see, Farha Khalidi. Farha Khalidi? I'm sure some of you out there know who she is. Currently OnlyFans creator. Now, when we say OnlyFans creator, OnlyFans has, for better or worse, expanded their brand. I think they have cooking shows. I'm presuming it's the naked girls that people whack off to that are on the cooking shows, right? I mean, that would only make sense, but I know other people have OnlyFans stuff. Maybe she's a creator giving legal advice. I'm making presumptions here when I say that she's squirting out political propaganda, but it goes to show you how insidious this entire thing is now. How these people are not just using those jag-offs, you know, those two obnoxious young white guys that make those cringe-ass TikTok videos and social media videos telling you how great the leftist worldview is and how wonderful the Democrats are and blah, blah, blah. It's not just that they're paying those people who will deny it, right? They've got levels of separation, but those levels of separation are kind of like the levels of separation between the DNC paying the people that created, what's that? Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of that report that came out. The one that with the Trump getting peed on thing, the Steele report. There we go. The Steele dossier. It's kind of like that, right? Oh, well, Joe Biden's administration's not paying for it, but of course they're being paid by the DNC or by some conduit of the administration to say the things that they're saying. Similar to Christopher Steele being paid by the DNC to create the Steele dossier, yada, yada. Now, it is fascinating, though, that this is the tack they're taking. Because you think about, where is Joe Biden not really resonating? Well, as we're seeing on campuses, which I'll talk about briefly, by the way, as we're seeing on campuses, Joe Biden's got a stranglehold on some of the population, but he's also losing quite a large amount of the other population. There's an argument to be made that the TikTok generation specifically is not in favor of Joe Biden nor the Democrats. Thus, they have to buy OnlyFans / TikTok influencers' political viewpoints and pay them to express them. Otherwise, they're not going to have any presence on there. There's been more videos I've seen of the younger generation railing against the machine and coming around to realize that, yes, the Democrats are, in fact, the empire. They are, in fact, the dominant cultural, omnipotent, omnipresent force controlling people's lives, ruining people's high school graduations through to college graduations. If you recall, USC has now capitulated to the heckler's veto, which is something that will, again, I'll talk about this in a minute more. They're not going to have a high school graduation, right? If you're in LA, or, let's just say you're the generation 2020, you have no high school graduation and no college graduation. If you're graduating from USC or probably Columbia, you'll cancel their graduation ceremonies, etc. So why would you be inclined to have a worldview where Joe Biden is this wonderful, magnificent being as your parents struggle to make ends meet, as you have zero prospects coming out of college or even going into college, as you've seen the effects of COVID ripple through your neighborhoods, ripple through your ability to hang out with your friends. Again, if you're in high school and they're canceling your closing classes down, you're prohibited from hanging out, you're prohibited from going to a playground, you can't go to the movies. I mean, it's not surprising. That's all I'm saying. And I don't know if there's fertile ground, to make a bad pun, of people spilling their seed that are sitting at home looking at OnlyFans models that are somehow going to be convinced by this. I suppose maybe you're at a vulnerable point. I mean, you're certainly more dehydrated. Maybe there's some sort of evidence to support that. You're protein deficient, you're dehydrated, and thus your brain is more susceptible to political meanderings from one of these people from a paid perspective. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And of course, this comes at a time when the media is both accusing people that are not rabid supporters of the DNC of being right-wing incels. You'll recall this was a narrative that was popular maybe 6 to 8 months ago. Similar to everything in the corporate media it ran through, everybody talked about it because it was a handed down talking point from the DNC or from the Biden administration that was repeated ad nauseum. These incels, these right-winger incels, are who's shooting up all the things. Now, of course, that changed once it started being trans people that were shooting everything up, but that was the narrative. If you notice recently, that narrative also just got flipped on its head because the new talking point from the left is that the right-wingers are now baby obsessed and concerned with, of course, populating the earth. Now, if you're a religious type, you probably believe that you want to populate the earth anyway. You know, that's what we're here for. Don't waste that seed on OnlyFans models, especially if they're spewing propaganda. And there's a a conference that was being held basically around birthing, right? I don't know. How to birth, the best ways to birth. Do you need a doula? What do they call those people? The weird witches that sit next to you and help you give birth. A doula. Doopy-doula. The media frenzy cycled around the fact that this conference was happening. So at the same time, we're being told that the right-wingers are incels, which means that you don't try to have sex, you're mad at women, and you hate women, and you don't have any interest in screwing anymore, and you just have your anime pillow, and that's all that you need, you know, those stuffed titties in your face. We're being told that the incels are the big far-right problem at the same time now that we're being told that the far-right is massively concerned about having babies and repopulating the earth. Obviously, these things don't add up. But as we've seen before, when it comes to corporate media, when it comes to talking points, they don't have to add up because they plan on you having a very short memory that won't remember the things that they said a mere 4 months previous. Maybe they're right. But because the internet does live forever and is undefeated in its memory, I think people are starting to notice that they're throwing shit against the wall that's not necessarily sticking. And when you see something like this girl coming out, and I'm sure, by the way, she is one of thousands. That's what I'm telling you. Thousands. I work in public relations. I have dealt with influencer relations before, especially when it comes to influencers of different levels. Because, guys, the way it works is not just that you go out and you buy 10 mega influencers. No, there's different levels. There's things called micro influencers. I suppose at this day and age, I am considered that. I used to be somebody. So there's people like me that'll, suck your dick on a street corner for $15. And then there's people going all the way up to Joe Rogan, who, by the way, is paid for a lot of his content too. Now, he's probably not going to take money from Joe Biden, but maybe he'll take it from a corporate sponsor of some level. The question is, will people go down the political agenda route? This girl seems to convince herself that she hasn't taken it on fully because, well, I'm not going to say everything that they tell me. But she said most of it, didn't she? And I think that a lot of the people along those lines that they're reaching out to, people in college, and don't be fooled, I'm sure they identify people that are more likely to go along with this. Of course, being of the age group they're trying to reach, aka in college, because you're not going to be able to pay a minor. You have to go through their parents, which might be even worse, because if their parents are DNC voting Gen Zs, well, then you're real fucked. But, or I say millennials. Well, and Gen Z. Point being, I'm sure this is in the thousands, between influencers to micro-influencers, in the thousands. And it shows you the ever-present nature of political thought now throughout culture. And we blame, a lot of us, we blame Donald Trump for this, right? Trump, we think, pushed this forward. Trump made it so that all we could talk about was this, right? And I think there's some truth to that, mostly pushed forward because of corporate media and because of the left's absolute mind-bogglingly, insulting and stupid freakout over Donald Trump, where they made him the center of the world and this demonic, satanic figure that had to be attacked in every mainstream medium we had. Yes, that forced it into conversations. But now we're seeing that they're working behind the scenes, just like they manipulated social media during COVID, during the electoral cycle, to quash certain narratives, to play certain narratives up. Well, we're now seeing they're paying people to do it too. And I don't think a lot of people realize that that was the case. I think people look to influencers because they're a source of authenticity, right? That's why brands work with influencers. But at least with brands, you know when you're being sold something. With a brand, the chick's holding up a water bottle, or she's dumping a substitute for milk into her latte, or she's, pushing something, or he's pushing for gut health supplements. Whatever it might be, the product's right there in front of you. It's on a t-shirt, it's in a hand, it's in a cup, it's up an ass. Whatever it is, it's right there. You can identify it. When it comes to stuff like this, when it comes to political thought and opinion, well, unless you're wearing a Biden t-shirt, which a lot of these people are probably not going to do, well, then, and I'm sure they tell them not to do for that matter. I mean, I would tell them, do not wear a Biden t-shirt. I want this to seem like you are thinking it authentically. She got into that a little bit with the Ketanji Brown shit. Imagine how much is being fed to people from these middle tier influencers who could certainly use $5,000 or $6,000 in their pocket. And frankly, they're like, what do I care? Maybe I kind of agree with some of this stuff. I'll take the $6,000 and I'll tell my, whatever it might be, 60,000 followers that Biden's doing a great job. That we need more Ketanji Jackson Browns on the Supreme Court, even though she has proven that she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. It's just kind of like a wow moment to think about how often this happens, how pervasive it is through the next generation. But hopefully, like with everything else, hopefully this is going to be a little nudge to waking the fuck up. All right, next thing. Let's talk about, real quick, let's talk about, I mentioned the campus protests, and I want to talk about a little bit more mainstream media stuff with the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So, the campus protests. I don't know how many of you are purely libertarian thinking and you want me to go into the finer details of libertarianism here, but I will say there's been some controversy, as always happens, around the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which is known for some aggressive libertarian takes, and had tweeted out some images, some thoughts about whether or not police are showing incredible restraint by not shooting violent protesters that were seemingly aggressing on them. Now, they had shared a photo. I'm sure there's video of it, but it does show people pushing on a barrier against cops who are right up against the wall. That certainly does seem to be a threatening situation. And the way I looked at it, we were kind of talking about this in a little bit of in our inner circle. The way I look at it, and I've said this, it's going to be controversial what LP New Hampshire posted. I also can't find anything wrong with it, if I'm being completely honest. Because look, we have a problem, especially in the libertarian circle, because we view the cops as enemies, right? This is just the way it is. We view them as oppressors of our civil rights. We view them as people that let us down, that don't function and do their duty properly, that are known for abuse, that are known for corruption, that are known for not being able to be fired, for not being held accountable. Of course, these are all true things. But we seem to also forget that these are people. Okay? These are people. And no, if you're a cop, you should not necessarily be showing absolute restraint if somebody is violently coming at you in a mob scenario. You know what? They are showing restraint by not pulling out their firearms, guys. And I don't care if you say, well, these are college protesters. Yeah, they are. You know what they also are? They also might have a penchant for violence. They're also a group in a mob mentality that's shoving you in a situation where you're not going to be able to necessarily get out of. When do you fear for your life? Okay? I'm not saying that LP New Hampshire is not saying go out and just start shooting protesters when they're standing around. They're saying that these people are showing restraint in this scenario, and they're right. I will defend them here. They're right. I'm not going to defend everything LP New Hampshire does. I'm not going to say that they're right in all their messaging, but in this instance, they're right. You know what they're also right about? The fact that there is a position here where you go, okay, these protesters, they can have a right to protest. The colleges also have a right to forcibly remove them from college property, from private property, from blocking students, just as happened with UCLA I saw today, from blocking students from entering campus where they're paying money, where they're trying to go about their lives, and these people are impeding their progress. I'm sorry, that's not your right. You don't have the right to take over somebody's private property. This happened during BLM. I've talked about how private property is being overtaken by fucking homeless here in Los Angeles, and finally something's being done against it because the mayor currently knows that she's fucked if she doesn't get rid of the homeless because people are fed up. But no, you can't block people from going everywhere at all times. You cannot occupy private property on campus. You cannot go. And there was one instance, well, this is going a different direction, but it was like a private residence. Some idiot protester took a microphone and started protesting on somebody's private property of their house and then was completely blown away when she got arrested. Guys, there's a balance here, right? Between your right to protest and between the rights of citizens, the rights of people that are going to school there, and the rights of the people that own that property. There is a fine balance. And some people say, well, you know what? But they're publicly funded universities. Okay, there's still property there that fucking belongs to that college. Doesn't mean that it's completely communal property for everybody. That's not the way this works. And I'm sick of seeing people get so up in arms about this when I'm sorry, it's simple logic. It's simple logic, guys. I mean, we had, from the Libertarian Party perspective, we said, look, we support free speech. We are in support of people protesting as they want to protest. But again, there's a line to all of these things. There is a line. Just like there's a line, talk about the Libertarian perspective, whether or not you're allowed to go across the street and shoot somebody if they've not shot at you first. Well, do you feel your life's imminently in danger? You might think that it's appropriate to go and shoot that person. Same thing applies to cops, guys. Nope, hate to break it to you, same thing applies. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the mainstream media here. Let's talk about the corporate media, aka the enemy of the people, sitting, breaking bread with the other enemy of the people, right? The corporate media, which we saw during COVID, completely kowtowed, collaborated, colluded with the federal government, colluded with social media for X's to censor information that they didn't like. Well, they sat down for the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is supposed to make fun of the president, supposed to have the White House correspondents get a chance to push back, right? To give some jabs at the prez, hold him accountable. Well, none of that happened. None of that happened. Colin Jost is a joke. His efforts were pathetic at best. And I just couldn't get over how the media has completely abdicated any efforts to hold the Biden administration accountable for anything, from my perspective. They seem to be playing far more defense. Yuri Berliner from the NPRs. So like a real old man. The only of the NPRs. You can listen to it on the radio waves these days. You have a VCR? But Yuri Berliner had gone into the fact that they were completely monoculture. It was absolute left-wing bias. No effort to correct or in any way make sure the record was even close to being accurate when it came to COVID, when it came to Hunter Biden's laptop, or anything that could help Trump. And he specifically cited that one of his main editors at NPR, longtime editor, refused to cover anything regarding, I think it was the Hunter Biden laptop story, because the truth would help Trump. So these jerk-offs sit down in a room with Biden and pat each other on the back. And by the way, they just named as the new president of the White House Correspondents. I'm not sure of his name, but I do know he is a black gay man, and they had proudly touted this fact, who attended this event in a dress. Now, do whatever you want to do. I don't give a shit if you want to wear a dress to an event. I don't give a shit if you're black or gay. We're all of the above. But it certainly goes to show you where their bread is being buttered and where they intend the world to comprehend them from. And that certainly is in line with the Biden administration's push with the utmost super progressive policies. And it's funny to watch them sit down and masturbate each other. And at the same time, again, ignore the Biden administration's continued persecution of Julian Assange, continued attempts to jail Assange, right? We're still trying to extradite him to the United States. in order to throw him back into prison or potentially execute him, even though he's not an American citizen. The Biden administration's outward attempts to change documents, to obfuscate and deny press access, to censor the media and reports, aka Hunter Biden's laptop, to work hand in hand with social media to censor the truth, and to, again, work directly with journalists to censor the truth. Because it wasn't just the Biden administration, but it was also journalists working directly hand in hand with the Stanford Internet Observatory, journalists who would rat out to social media companies other journalists that didn't agree with the Biden administration. So these people know what the Biden administration has done as far as press freedoms. They know how the Biden administration feels about press freedoms because we're seeing it on display with Julian Assange currently. And yet they're going to sit down with this man and really give him the full hand job treatment, just like Howard Stern did. So it was fascinating to see today a specific moron in the media, and the Hill covered this story, which really pisses me off. The media talks about, in the Hill, MSNBC host Nicole Wallace, so you know she's fair and balanced as can possibly be. Well, she thinks she might not be on the air if former President Trump wins the election this fall. Because, you know, Donald Trump... Now, look, Donald Trump did not pardon Julian Assange, by the way, which really pisses me off. Nor Edward Snowden, which, again, really pisses me off. And I'm not a huge fan of what Donald Trump did during his presidency. But I'll tell you what, Donald Trump didn't go through jailing journalists, to the best of my knowledge. He didn't cancel all freedom of the press. He didn't start, assassinating people. He didn't change any laws about free speech. None of these things I'm aware of. And he was in office for 4 years. Why do these morons keep repeating this crap? He's going to cancel freedom of the press. He's going to, I have people that listen to Nicole Wallace that literally have told me to my face that Donald Trump's going to be a dictator. To which I respond to them, how is Donald Trump in any way more of a dictator than Joe Biden in what we've seen during the courses of their presidencies? Please explain this to me. Because it doesn't add up on a narrative perspective in any way. Donald Trump, if anything, is the biggest fan of the press that's ever been. Donald Trump got elected in 2016 because of nonstop press coverage. Donald Trump very well may get elected again because of massive press coverage, especially around all of these trials, the lawfare that's going on that the DNC for some reason thought was a great idea. Maybe to prop him up, thinking he's the only guy Joe Biden could beat, which might be fair. But my God, if there's either danger to the left of you or the right of you, it's definitely to the left of you with Joe Biden. And yet, The Hill, which of course is a left-leaning rag, by the way, pretending to be a political publication, The Hill will report on this, that this is a great fear. God forbid we get Donald Trump in there to take away our press freedoms. And another thing I got to warn you about, if Donald Trump does get in there, Rob Reiner has promised to set himself on fire. So, famous anti-smoking advocate going to set himself on fire. You're telling me that secondhand smoke from that fat chunk isn't going to be much worse for us than any number of cigarettes? I'd rather light up some Barbies, I'll tell you that. I don't need Rob Reiner hair and flesh going in my lungs. All right, so let's see. What else? You know what? We talked about Javier Milei. And I don't want to give Javier too much credit because he didn't do what El Salvador's president did here. El Salvador's president, let me share this video. I'm not going to share the video. I don't feel like playing it. But El Salvador's president, I'm going to mess this name up. Nayib Bukele? Bukele? Yeah, well, anyway, good old Nayib. He had every single official in the executive branch come meet him, right? Everybody gets together in a big room. He has the press come there. And he announces right there in front of him that the attorney general is going to investigate every single last one of them for bribery and corruption. Not just the people in front of him, but the people that came before them as well. Now that is a baller move. And of course, he's talking about the fact that he might get assassinated. I mean, shit, if I was in that room, I'd probably try to assassinate him right there. But that's how it's done, people. Getting on the Bitcoin standard, right? El Salvador, first to do that. Deregulating the tech industry. If you're not familiar, El Salvador has completely done that. I'm pretty sure, eliminated all taxes. Don't quote me on that. Google it yourselves or DuckDuckGo it or do whatever the fuck you want to do with it. But I know that they give massive tax incentives, if not outright tax forgiveness for everything technology related, which is, of course, what we're advocating for as libertarians forever, right? You want something to succeed, get rid of the taxes on it, make it easier to get in, make it easier to invest. Joe Biden, of course, going the opposite way, wants to raise the corporate tax to unforeseen heights. Smart, Joe. Real smart. But that's, pretty awesome. Pretty awesome, guys. All right, let's see. I want to move on to a couple other things. We'll talk about Biden, and then I'll finish up with Seinfeld, which I meant to talk about earlier with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but, life. Afroman. I talked about previous episodes how I think Black Americans are pivoting away from Joe Biden. I think you're seeing evidence of this in many places. Prominently, Joe Biden and the FDA banning menthol cigarettes, which, as I had argued several episodes ago, really undermines their entire philosophy or their entire premise of being there for the health and good of the nation if they're willing to, for political purposes, delay banning of a substance they're telling us is killing children and killing adults and is the worst thing in the world. We have to get rid of it. You can't even have the choice to have it. But you know what? We can wait 6 months, 8 months because we don't want to piss off the black vote. Cool, FDA. But the latest example is Afroman. Now, I'm not going to play the songs. It'll just get dinged and removed. But go check it out. Afroman, who is famous for the song, Then I Got High. Because I got high, because I got high, because I got high. Ba-doop-ba-doop-doop. So he just released a new version called Hunter Got High. And apparently he's also announced that he's running for president. Now, his run for president is not going to garner anything. It's just kind of a funny aside. But the fact that he's, again, coming out and going after Hunter Biden, going after Joe Biden with this song, one of the most iconically well-known songs. And I can tell you, even if you are a Democrat, even if you are a Joe Biden honk, you are going to know this song exists. It's going to pop in your head and it's going to do some damage. Because this is another drop in the bucket telling you Black America's moving away from Joe. Period. I know Hotep Jesus was just on a show talking about that. You're seeing the writing on the wall here. That Joe Biden is inauthentic, that Black America is waking up to the fact that the Democrats do not represent their best interest, have never, that they take them for granted, that every policy they've ever created has been a massive detriment to the black population. And that essentially what they're being put into is, you can't even call it a gilded cage. The only thing you could call it is a cage of welfare, of over-policing, of drugs, of, again, horrible foster care systems and family outcomes, of what? You can even argue right now that DEI is actually impairing the black community because you're removing standards for education. You're removing incentive for people to learn and to graduate with education degrees that actually mean a damn. You're eliminating accountability for people in schooling, right? And when you talk about some of the worst schools out there, you need to have some accountability. You need to have some performance indicators, and yet they're getting rid of that for pass-fail grades. They're pushing forward black students based around the George Floyd riots, where you're not allowed to hold them, accountable for missing school or truancy or fights. You pump their grades up because, they feel so bad about this. But it's not about them. And it never was. It's about continuing to hold a population down, to pat them on the head and treat them as though they're children in exchange for their votes. But that's only going to work for so long. And frankly, it took too long. But they're coming around. Now, I don't want the black population of the country to go to the Republicans either, because I don't think they do anything good for them. I want them to all vote libertarian. But you're seeing that generationally, as things get worse, not better, and it's put on full display, things have got to change. And I think that change is now. Again, 2024 is going to be a fantastic and interesting year for progress. and Afroman's helping it along. Okay, last thing, Seinfeld. You know me, I do stand-up comedy for shits and gigs here and there, but Jerry Seinfeld has said out loud what more comedians should be saying. And as anytime somebody that is affiliated with the left, that is a cultural icon, anytime they speak up and dare to put their head above the water of, I'd say the tepid and flat waters of Democrat or progressive, I'm trying to think what you'd call it. Just, you never want to make waves, right? You want to stay essentially in the shallow end of the pool. Well, Jerry dove into the deep end, attacking cancel culture, attacking political correctness, attacking even DEI, right? Attacking the quote unquote non-housed, or what do they call the homeless now? Homing impaired, whatever stupid phrases they make up. But Seinfeld went on a show and he said, look, you can't make my show today. Curb Your Enthusiasm, you're able to do that because it got grandfathered in. And, now if you try to make that show, it wouldn't fly. Now, of course, corporate media, left wing, all the finest white writers of the Democratic complex immediately attacked Seinfeld and said, well, here's 4 reasons you're wrong. And of course, they point to like Rick and Morty, who, of course, hilariously, Rick and Morty, they had to swap out the lead writer and one of the lead voices, Justin Roiland, because of what? Oh, cancel culture, because his ex-girlfriend accused him of some misdeeds, I don't know, domestic violence, which he was cleared of. But Hulu fired him in advance before it came to trial, before anything was even resolved, cut ties, fired him. I don't know if he was guilty or not. Dan Smotz and I went through and talked about this on one of our review episodes. I don't know if he was guilty or not. But I'll tell you, it certainly plays to Seinfeld's point where you create these shows, and it doesn't take much for them to be canceled if they do get through. But the number of shows that leaned into funny jokes, if you watch a TV show now on any of the major networks, I dare you to laugh a single time. I mean, I'll give you an example. American Dad, a show I used to enjoy greatly. It's funny. Now, Family Guy, still funny, still pushes the limits, but Family Guy's grandfathered in. American Dad, I would argue, is too. But it really sucks shit now. The jokes don't hit. They say it's edgy or it's not. It's cowardly. It doesn't take real shots anywhere. It doesn't really push any boundaries. Futurama, another show I used to love. I'll tell you, I tried to watch the latest season, and that's a Hulu show as well. They picked it up on Hulu. Pure garbage. Every episode now, instead of being a sci-fi classic with, hilarious lines and zingers and willing to take, a little bit of risky humor here and there, now it's the safest left-wing humor you can find. All they do is talk about current events. All they do is poke fun at left-wing popular issues. And of course, when I mean poke fun, I'm not saying they're poking fun at the leftist issues. They're poking fun from the leftist perspective. And I had to look just to see who wrote these shows. And of course, it's all fat, black, and gay. Not really, but the one episode I looked up because it was so bad happened to be a fat, black, gay writer. To Seinfeld's point, what was funny, what could be funny, what could get through is almost impossible now in our current environment. I've talked about this forever, the pool of writers they draw from is so infinitesimally small now because they're not hiring me as a white, straight guy. Doesn't matter how good the script's going to be, they're not going to hire me. They're instead specifically looking for check boxes of people to write. And that's just the facts. I've used this example before. I've written, packets for late night and I stopped doing it. I wrote one I thought was really good. And then I realized, they're only doing diversity workshops for this crap now. And I look at who gets selected and it's, there's maybe one white straight guy in there. So I said, this isn't worth my time. Unfortunately, I'll still write some features here and there and I'll still try a little bit, but the timing of this ain't great. And what I like to write also is more in line with edgy comedy, with stuff that leads into, what would definitely get you canceled today. I mean, Seinfeld gave a great example. As people pushed back against him, saying you could make Seinfeld today. No, you could make it. It would suck. because half the plots wouldn't happen. One he gave a specific example of, which I agree completely. Kramer starts a company where the homeless, he says, oh, I'll give the homeless rickshaws. They're outside all the time anyway. That's great. It's hilarious. There's no way in fuck you'd get that on the air. No way. Absolutely impossible. Rob McElhaney. Massive respect for Rob McElhaney. He is the head writer, creator for Always Sunny in Philadelphia. One of the best shows that's ever been on television. Also, don't forget, that show came in before all this shit started going haywire. He agrees with Seinfeld. Said, yeah, probably not. Probably not going to be able to make that show now. Those who deny what has happened, those who give a very small field of examples of shows that have become successful or have found a way through, two of which, by the way, are from Justin Roiland that were on Hulu, which he was kicked off of, amid a sea of mediocre, safe trash writing. I mean, I almost feel like, it used to be easier to write for sitcoms in the 80s. This was like a running joke. The 70s were kind of a golden age, right? It was really boundary pushing stuff. Then the 80s were utterly mediocre for sitcoms. It was simple writing, simple plots. But that, of course, gave rise to the edgier comedy of the 90s, where people said, okay, this was a pretty boring crap era. Let's push the boundaries a little bit. And they did. But I feel like we've reverted to a 80s style of show now, except with a much more diverse writing staff of people who suck shit. That's just where we're at. Seinfeld sees it. Any thinking individual sees it. Anybody with any sense of humor sees it, which is also why there has been, and Seinfeld said this, and I was like, wow, this is a fantastic point. This is why there's a resurgence in comedy clubs, in comedy in general now, because there are still some clubs that are censoring people. We know that from Legion of Skanks cancellations at various comedy clubs. But for the most part, you're going to be able to go up and say what you want to say. That there is a hunger for a return to, I want to be surprised. I want to be shocked. I want to have an edge put on this. Because the problem with comedy that's so safe and stupid and predictable, because it's all coming from the exact same DEI shithead point of view, is that you know the jokes before they say them. In all of these, you know where the plot's going. You know what the joke is. You know it's safe. Comedy clubs can put that in the back of your mind. The idea, the best joke you can tell as a comedian is a joke that's so offensive to the person hearing it that they, for a second, stop and they try to get mad, and then they have to fucking laugh because it's that good of a joke. As a comedian, that's what you go for. And look, you can do that in TV too. They just don't let us anymore. They don't let us do it in TV. Maybe in a movie here or there you could get away with it. Not often. So, good job to Seinfeld. Good job to Jerry. It's interesting. I think you're going to see more of it. I think you're going to see more of the old dogs get sick of this shit and say, you know what, I've had enough. I can't support the establishment anymore. I have to give up on it. I have to cut loose. I just can't look myself in the mirror anymore and see what they're doing to the thing that I love, the thing that made me famous, the thing that made me want to be who I am and drove me to spend hours and hours mastering this craft, and to see them just rip it apart. All right, well, that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me. If you want, you could go and subscribe. At Brian McWilliams is my Twitter, at Lions of Liberty Network. Give us a shout. Give us a nice comment. Give us some money. Patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. And Odie and I are going to figure out what we're going to do here now that Facebook has face fucked us. But that's our problem, not yours. So we'll figure it out. All right, guys, from me, Brian McWilliams, from the Lions of Liberty Network, from Mean Age Daydream, keep those electric eyes on me, babe! And keep that ray gun to my head.